The Angry Marks Podcast Network is brought to you by WrestleWork, a social network to connect, create, and share everything about pro wrestling. Check it out today at WrestleWork.com.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
When it came time for us to wrestle, which was something like 7, 8, 9 weeks after Owen Hart had fallen in the Kemper Arena to his death, we wrestled in the Kemper Arena. And I walked in that night, and the first thing that caught me was the enormity of the building. And looking up at the ceiling, I got nauseous. I thought I was going to throw up because all I could see was my friend falling to his death there. And Flair got there and went right into his room and started calling people into his room. So I knew exactly what he was doing. I'd seen him do this before other people. I knew that the match was going to get screwed up, and I told Vince Russo multiple times getting into that. I said, do not let Rick get anybody else involved in the match. It has to be me and Rick for the fans to get what they need out of it. If you send anybody else down there, it doesn't matter if it's Sting and Vader. If anybody else hits that ring, for me, for him, against me, against him, it's going to kill the entire thing. And sure enough, if you go back and watch the match, you'll see his son David's out there, Sting's out there, Russo's out there in some kind of a goofball gimmick outfit. Just made buffoonery of it. You know, they had a real opportunity, and I really believe at that time that the franchise and Ric Flair, with the shoot heat that was between us, had that been booked properly and promoted and marketed properly, that could have begun to turn the corner back around for WCW against WWF. And instead we saw what had always been the problem in WCW, politics, politics, politics. And, you know, it's killed our business in several ways. It damn near killed Vince with the whole Click thing before he got fortunate enough to follow ECW's lead into the Attitude Era. You know, the politics is a cancer in the business. You know, and when you start listening to me and believing everything me says, I say, then sooner or later you're going to get burned by it. You know, you have to have ideas from everybody. You have to give everybody a little bit and push everybody. And when you start saying, okay, well, I'm just going to take care of this little group of guys over here, and everybody else just go to hell, well, then you're in the wrong business. You know, the business is wrestling, and that's one thing I think ECW did do right, was that everybody on the card mattered. It didn't matter if it was Danny Doring and Chris Chetty in the opening match, or Mikey Whipwreck in the middle matches, or Shane Douglas in the main event with Taz. It didn't matter. Everybody on that match mattered. And that's the way a wrestling company should be run, but it wasn't there. So long-winded, roundabout answer to your question. Rick and I remain on the outs with each other as far as I know. I have no personal feeling about him anymore because it's such a distant part of my past, and, you know, I've had a whole lot of great stuff happen in my life since then, a whole lot of bad stuff happened in my life since then, and it's almost like that hangnail you had 10 years ago. Do you think about it today? I don't. You know, it's you know, pretty much in the past to me.
This is the Undisputed Wrestling Show. We are talking to the franchise, Shane Douglas. And Shane, when you won the ECW title, well, actually it was NWA title, and disposed of it, creating shockwaves through the entire wrestling world, I guess, how did that story come about? Because obviously that was something that really hadn't been done before. And then you saw the Medusas of the world do it 10 years later after you had done it. Did you realize just how significant that event was at the time?
No. You couldn't possibly have understood the parameters of how big that would have been for ECW. I knew it was a critical moment for ECW. You know, it was either going to work or it wasn't going to work. You know, it's when you're really working that hard on something like we were at ECW, it's really hard to see the forest of the trees, you know, because you're so into it, so into the grindstone, that it's just another night of work. So let's go out and try this, and hopefully it works, and let's, you know, see how we can play off of it and that sort of thing. To be honest with you, the two big angles of my career in ECW were that and the Gary Wolf broken neck angle. And the Gary Wolf broken neck angle to me had so much more legs because it was a legitimate broken neck. Everybody in Philadelphia knew it was legit because Gary was seen all over town in that contraption for months. You know, just on the face of it, that one seemed to be the bigger of the two. And it was big in my career, but the belt throwdown was much bigger because it was a turning point in the business when that company came to be. that was when the night that we threw that belt down built my career, but it also put ECW on the map. It was when ECW went from crawling to running. Eastern became Extreme and all of that, but even at that point, none of us had any idea, and Paul Heyman and Todd Gordon included, what mark ECW was about to leave on the business. And none of us knew. It was lightning in a bottle, and none of us knew till it was far too late, until we were too far gone to be saved, that, Paul was, a brilliant writer and a really bad businessman. None of us knew that. We went to work every weekend and half killed ourselves and entertained the fans, and the fans entertained us, and it was just a real fun time in my career. It's by far the best 7.5 years of my career, that if I could go back to any portion of it, the beginning, the middle, the end, I'd do it and snap my fingers in a heartbeat and go back to it. It was phenomenal to be part of, and an honor to be part of. So, it's very few people get an opportunity to come into a brand new company on the ground floor, have an impact, and then make a mark on the business, leave a legacy. And that's what we did in ECW, and there were a whole lot of ingredients into that. We had a great crew of talent. We had a great writer in Paul. We had the best wrestling fans on the planet. The timing was perfect. It was coming out of that droll end of the 80s when, Dusty had done the 1,000,001 run-in finishes, and, Vince was going to cartoon land, and, the timing was right. The wrestling fans were ready to see something different, and boy, did they get it in ECW at that time. Ironically, I think they're the same time frame as just right now in wrestling. We've gone completely full circle and back to the same place. Inane storylines, inept characters, real bad writing. It's time for another ECW to rise.
No, it's definitely at a point where you don't have competition, you get lazy, and that's exactly what WWE is becoming. I was wanting to ask you this though, Shane. Back to that the belt dropping again. Was Dennis Coralluzzo with the NWA a part of this, or was it something that you infuriated the man by doing this, or was Eastern Championship Wrestling was breaking away from the NWA at that time, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Eastern Championship Wrestling was part of the NWA, and we were the only part of the NWA that was hot. We had a strong fan base. We were building monthly. Next month we were going to be bigger than this month, and we were bigger this month than last month. They were wanting to use ECW as the foundation to build the return of NWA, back. And even in hindsight now, it wouldn't have worked. The belt throwdown was the best option for us at that time, because let's look down at the other avenue. The SAG didn't throw the belt down and remained the NWA champion. What has the NWA done since then? Nothing. They've had a whole lot of people hold the NWA belt. They've not ever congealed back into a company. So we had to ask ourselves as a company, were we going to allow them to use what we had built, and in all likelihood, most of us get pushed out the door at some point, or were we going to use the pomp and circumstance of that tournament to catapult us even bigger? And I think in hindsight, the only decision that could have been made was to do what we did. And again, there was no guarantee it was going to work. The fans could have just farted on that and said, man, that's the worst angle I've ever seen. Thank God they didn't. They bought into it. And my only fear going into it, not a fear, but a concern in going into it, was that I didn't want people that I admired and respected, like Ricky Steamboat, Dorian, Terry Funk, the Briscoe brothers, Ric Flair even, as much as I don't like the guy, I didn't want any of them, Harley Race, I didn't want any of them thinking that I was trying to demean anything that they had accomplished in the NWA, because I certainly wasn't. It was simply as a snapshot in time. The NWA was dead and gone. ECW was on its rise, and Coralluzzo's actions that night in the building, that day in the building, that entire day in the building, is what sealed his fate with it, because I was truly back and forth all day. He kept following me around with an NWA contract. Look, if God handed me a contract, I wouldn't sign it until my lawyer read it, especially in wrestling. And I politely told Dennis that, and he followed me around that entire day and shoved that contract into my face all day. He even stood outside of a toilet stall while I was taking a crap. And when I walked out, handed me it again. And that's when I threw it back and said, Dennis, if you show me this contract again, I'll shove it up your ass. And I walked away, and Paul had to pull me aside right away and say, don't stooge it off, don't stooge it off. I hadn't made my mind up at that point. In fact, you see, when I stop and I look up and I say, here we go, Dad, that was when I made the decision that I was throwing the belt down. It was a combination of all these things that had gone on the week prior to that, and then that day. And when I looked over, if you watch closely, you'll see me, I'm scanning around the arena before I look up to say that to my dad, and I make eye contact with Caruso, and that's when the decision was made on the spot. So, thankfully, it worked, because it could have very easily been